Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the debates for PoliticsNY as we get ready to hold another primary election on August 23rd. This is Schneps Media. I'm Jane Hanson along with Stephen Witt, and we are here to be the moderators this evening and what we hope will be a very interesting discussion. Now, of course, it's an unusual election year because when's the last time there was a primary in August? It's a second primary. But this time it's for the election of candidates that will run for the state Senate and for congressional races. And tonight we're going to focus on Congressional District 2, which is most of Suffolk County on Long Island, or much of Suffolk County on Long Island, and a little bit of Nassau County. It's basically Massapequa to Eastport. And we will introduce you to our two candidates in just a moment. But before we get started, I want to just do a little bit of ground rules for the format of what we're going to be doing this evening. Both of you will be allowed an opening statement, about 2 minutes in length. And Steve is our illustrious timekeeper. And so if he starts to wave, that means time's up. And then if he really waves frantically, that means you better really stop it. So, and that will be followed by the opening statement will be followed by a round of questioning, and you will each have 1 minute to respond. And then if you choose to respond to what the other candidate is saying, raise your hand, we'll call on you and you'll have another minute to respond. Also, we will have you at one point ask each other a question or two, just to kind of keep things interesting. And then at the end, a closing statement. Depending upon timing, that'll be 1 minute to 2 minutes in length. So thank you both for joining us this evening, and we're very happy that you are here. Let me introduce our candidates. We have with us Robert Cornicelli, who is a retired Army captain, lives in St. James, was also in the Navy, I believe. You were a twofer, from what I can tell. And has been very involved with national security and the like. And we also have another veteran with us, that is Mike Rakebrandt, who was in the Navy and was a New York City Police Department detective for quite some time, lives in Holbrook. So welcome to both of you. We're delighted that you are here. You might be seeing that we're missing someone who happens to be the incumbent congressman, Representative Andrew Garbarino. But I do believe that you've been in contact with him, Steve, and he gave you a little something to read, did he not?
Yes, he did. He gave me the following statement from the campaign. Congressman Andrew Garbarino was unable to participate in tonight's debate as the House of Representatives is in session. He is in Washington, D.C., conducting official duties on behalf of the people of New York's 2nd District and fighting against the Biden-Pelosi agenda. He looks forward to future opportunities to engage with the community and to share his vision for a second term in Congress as part of the Republican majority in the House next year.
Okay, there you have it. He's working hard in Washington, where there are no Zooms. Anyway,
good point, Jane.
You took my line, darn it.
That's good, very good point.
So let me begin with our opening statements. Mr. Cornicelli, how about if you begin for us?
Well, thank you. My name is Robert Cornicelli, and I want to thank you for putting this debate together. Forums like these help candidates like me run against the establishment. We need platforms like this to get our message out, so thank you. I'm married 15 years to a wonderful woman named Cynthia. I have 2 beautiful kids. Christian is 7, Sienna is 11. I'm a civil servant for almost 30 years. I'm a veteran of the Navy. I'm a retired Army, United States Army National Guard captain. But you know, what's really important is not the things that I got paid to do. Those are good, good experiences to run for office, but they're not what a person should be judged on. We should be judged on what we did for 0 personal gain. I got paid to do those jobs. What's most important is what you do in your off time for your community, for those people who don't have the ability to either fight unjust causes themselves or just are less fortunate. I've been fighting in my community for almost 30 years, whether it was in the 90s, Meals on Wheels. I was a volunteer fireman. I'm a lifetime member of the VFW and the American Legion. To recently, for the past 10 years, I've been feeding and clothing homeless veterans through my 501c3 called Veteran Recovery Coalition. We feed every single homeless veteran in every shelter on Long Island every major holiday. For Christmas, Hanukkah, we buy them every single toy off their child's Christmas list. If they're going back into the workforce, we get their cars up and running. We pay their insurance, their back insurance. We fill up the tank. We've been doing this stuff for 10 years. During the China virus, we were helping raise money for people who had kids with autism who couldn't get their kids back into their residences where their special programs were. We were raising money to get them some programs to their homes. When the healthcare workers had those medical mandates forced upon them, I was out there in that 20-degree weather rallying with those nurses, those healthcare professionals. When BLM and Antifa were marching through our county, I was stopping with our Defend Police rallies. Critical race theory, DEI, unconscious bias, white fragility, white privilege. I've been fighting these things in the school district since critical race theory became a national issue. I was probably one of the first people to actually fight against it in public. So thank you for having me. I saw the hand go up.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Your turn.
Thank you. Thank you very much for putting us on, for having us out, for letting us get our message out to the people. I'm Mike Rakebrandt. I am an America First Republican. I'm an active NYPD detective, combat veteran, Purple Heart recipient. I'd like to kind of explain why I got into this race, how it kind of came to be. I've been volunteering in the community for quite some time, quietly, obviously, with mostly with veterans, PTSD, things of that nature. I was speaking to a group of veterans, and one that I know very well, who's involved in politics at like the Albany, Washington level, have been pushing me for some time to kind of step into the races or get into politics in some way. And my answer to him was always like, yeah, okay, maybe when I retire. I never had any intention of doing it. It wasn't something I ever really saw myself doing. But like most people, I've watched over the years as Congress has become more and more of a clown show, as politics in general become more and more a clown show. And then I got to see what everybody else saw when President Trump came into office, and he kind of shook that landscape like an earthquake. You know, he made apparent how really awful it was, how really dysfunctional and disconnected politics has become. So for me, that was kind of a wake up moment. And I started to pay more attention even than I had before, so that it came to the point where I was speaking to a group of these veterans about PTSD, about the problems going on with things with the VA, things of that nature. We were discussing solutions. And this person called me out in front of the group of people and said, you know, you could do it. You could get in the race. You could fight back. You could take these things to Washington. You could make a lot of really good changes, but you're not. You're just sitting here talking with us. And what are you going to do? And I had no response. I had absolutely no response for him. My only response was to actually say, well, you know what? Let me talk to my wife, which got them breaking my chops a bit, you know, and then I spoke to my wife, and she was 100% for it. You know, she told me either you do it or, you know, get out. No, she was very supportive. She really came through and was very supportive, and here we are.
Thank you.
Well, obviously this is a Republican primary that we're talking about here. You two seem very similar. You both are veterans, have served this country, given it your heart and soul, have continued to serve the public and do good deeds in so many ways that you both just described right now, and obviously care very much about the veterans in this country. And I'm just wondering, what is there that separates you? It seems like you both have very similar ideals and very similar goals. So it seems that united, you might be better. Do one of you want to try to tell me what the differences are? Mike, I can see you smiling.
Sure. I mean, to the difference, I mean, I think in the resume and in the background, I think we both have the same overall intentions and the same idea as far as policy and that concern in general and those kinds of things. I think what the difference lies in is the backgrounds for us. You know, I spent my entire career, my adult life, working in industries and areas where critical thinking and decision-making and life and death decision-making were a constant, you know, where pressure and the ability to perform under extreme pressure was a constant. You know, I fought my way through Ramadi, Iraq in 2004 during some of the most arduous fighting the war on terror saw, and did so with an extremely high survival rate amongst my Marines, you know, as a corpsman. So I know what it takes to work under pressure. I know what it takes to carry a case through when you're working for days without sleep, when you're chasing down leads, you're talking to witnesses, when you're interviewing people, when you're going through all the kind of the twists and turns that you can find in cases just about every time. I can work in those conditions, and I've proven that time and again for over 25 years now.
Okay, and you, Robert?
Yeah, I think we're worlds apart when it comes to what we believe qualifies someone to become an elected official. I don't really talk about my almost 30 years in civil service and my military career. I got paid to do that. I got paid to do the job. I think too many people go into this business thinking that this is a job, this is a responsibility, and you shouldn't really be thinking about a paycheck and what that paycheck can do for you at home. You should be doing things outside your normal day's work. Me, I'm donating my entire retirement for my 30-year civil service job, a third to autism, a third to pediatric cancer research, and a third to veterans. I'm not going in this to profit. I'm going in this making whatever I'm making now and donating everything else. I'm not going down there to get power, to get influence, to benefit. What separates us, I think, is I talk about the things I did on the outside where there was zero personal gain, and we are worlds apart in that area. I have been fighting every fight out here for those people who couldn't or didn't have the will to step up and fight. Again, when BLM and Antifa were marching through, I was setting up these rallies. I didn't do anything quietly in the background. When healthcare workers were being forced to get those jabs, I was out there in 20-degree weather fighting them, fighting against those medical mandates. So I did it outwardly, and I rallied people to come out and do it themselves. So I think we're quite a bit different.
Okay, so I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I have a question, if I may. Pundits are saying that the Republicans are going to retake the House. So if they do retake the House, you're going to be in the majority. So the two questions I have is, what committees would you want to be on? And how do you, as a member of the majority, how would you fight a possible recession, some are calling it, and inflation? You know, what kind of plans would you put forward to curb that? So, Mr. Cornicelli first. So
one of the, I would definitely want to be on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. I still have a top secret clearance. I worked in the Defense Intelligence Agency under General Flynn. I know what it takes to fight back against countries trying to steal everything we have when it comes to defense. So I definitely want to be on that committee. I will definitely try to get on the veteran committee. And when you're talking about inflation and how to fight back, you know, we have to make this country prosper again. And the only way to do that, one, is to become energy independent. Two, is to bring back some manufacturing. You know, we still need to import things. Not everybody's going to want to buy, you know, sneakers at $50, $60. Some people are going to want to buy, you know, $20 or $30 sneakers from Taiwan. If you're in a real America First candidate, you got to think about those people who can't afford these things. So to get this country back to where it was, listen, we're a very giving people. If we're prospering and the country's prospering, we're going to take care of others, but we really have to be America first, not America only. We got 553,000 homeless Americans, 34 million living at or below the poverty level. So we have to start here in this country, get our manufacturing going, become energy independent, and reinvest in our infrastructure, not their infrastructure bill. Let's make that clear.
Thank you. And Mr. Rakebrandt, please.
I would definitely look for the Justice Committee. And then beyond that, Veterans Affairs, Rules Committee even, because I think it's important that we actually clean up what's going on in Congress to a certain degree as far as the violations of ethics and morals that are occurring daily, that are being reported regularly. As far as inflation, fighting inflation in the country, there's any number of ways to do that. I think most realistically, and if you're being honest about it, stop the spending, stop printing money like it's water, stop spending like it's never going to end, stop the regulatory tax burdens, open up the pipelines and bring back the refineries, which is probably more of an issue with the inflation than anything else. The high gas price drives a lot of that inflation currently. Bringing back our refineries and getting our oil refined here rather than shipping it overseas to refine it and bringing it back at 600% the cost is a big part of why we're at where we are. Bringing back manufacturing and agriculture and those things that made us so strong pre-World War II and now going forward into the 20th century are also great ways to get ourselves back in a strong position. And we've seen a rise of globalism over the last decades that has pretty much put us where we are right now as far as on the world stage and even within our own country as far as the economy. You know, we're moving ourselves from that equation as far as the globalism push and putting ourselves back to America first, which America first really is Americans first. And we need to make that the priority, bring people back to the fold, bring people back to work, bring back our manufacturing, restore our agriculture. And I think you'll see a dramatic change very, very quickly.
How would you do that?
As far as putting people back to work,
Yeah, tell me your plans.
I think it's much easier than not. So if we're looking at it realistically and honestly, right? The problem we have right now in our country is we are overregulated, overtaxed, and underrepresented, right? We have representatives and politically elected officials and unelected bureaucrats that are beholden to China or whatever other money special interests out there that are actually dragging us into this economic morass that we're in right now. So if we reduce a lot of this regulation that's unnecessary, burdensome, and reduce a lot of these taxes that are completely just out of control, I think you'll reinvigorate those communities. We have farmers right now that are being paid not to farm. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, we're paying these people not.
That's been going on for decades. I mean, I
No,
grew up
and
in
that's why
Minnesota.
we're who we are. This started a long time ago. Globalism's been around for a long time. They call it the New World Order or the New Liberal World Order, or whatever name you want to give it. It's been going on for quite some time, but it has to end. I mean, we've seen that. President Trump made it very obvious. President Reagan, even in his 2 terms, made very obvious the problems that were occurring, and we can look to history and look to our own current circumstance to see the genesis of it all and how to fix it. It's all man-made. We can put it right back to where it needs to be quite quickly.
Would you, and either one of you can answer this first, would you support Donald Trump if he were to run for re-election in 2 more years?
100%.
Both of you would.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
To play devil's advocate here, and I'm a very nonpartisan guy, I have been watching some of the hearings and seeing Congresswoman Cheney, and there is some evidence, it appears to me, that former President Trump, good job or bad job that he did seem to encourage people to storm the Capitol, and it got close to Vice President Pence. And I'm wondering if you feel January 6th what do you think about January 6th?
So January 6th, if you go to Garbarino's house page, he calls it an insurrection. If you go to his house page, he says a domestic terrorist. If you go to his house page, he says, and he's not here to defend himself, so I really don't want to beat up on him, though it's so easy because his record's abysmal, but he says Donald Trump was responsible. Donald Trump was responsible, not even one bit. He asked for calm. He said peacefully go down there. He did not say, when we say storm the Capitol, he never said that. Nobody said that. The gates were open. Nobody went in there with guns and knives looking to hurt a single cop, and no one was hurt except one poor woman named Ashley Babbitt, murdered. An insurrection means you're going in there to take control of the Capitol for good and not give it up. And that's not what happened. An insurrection is what happened with the BLM and the Antifa riots. So that committee is a joke. Garbarino's a joke for voting for it, January 6th committee, and it's got to be disbanded. And a real investigation has to be opened up about the deep state that's operating here and causing all these problems.
The deep what?
The deep state, the people in the background like Strucky and all these people in the IRS who are targeting conservative groups. We know what's been going on for years. We got to stop the BS and just get back to governing, getting people back to work, and stop with these committees that's wasting millions upon millions of dollars on a false narrative that President Trump was the least racist president of all times, that he was called a racist. He would never call for harm. He wanted our troops out of harm's way. He wanted to get rid of all these wars. And you're trying to say that this guy tried to get his followers who are peaceful, carrying flags, not throwing Molotov cocktails, to storm the Capitol. Come on, there's never been a single incident at any one of his rallies, yet every single Democrat on the left were calling for resistance, find them in restaurants, get in their faces, yet nobody calls them out. We can't continue in this country to move forward if we keep going along with those narratives. They're destructive and they keep separating us. And that is the goal of what Mike was talking about with these globalists, is to keep us separated and fighting one another, constant state of conflict. And it's sad. Not you, sir, but the fact that that narrative's out there.
And Mike, would you like to comment on that? Is that okay, Jay?
Absolutely.
Main
Thank you.
monitor.
The January 6th, not an insurrection, not even remotely an insurrection. Listen, I've fought insurrections. I fought, in combat. I fought BLM and Antifa on the streets of New York City. I was there when they were trying to take over the precincts, when they were storming them, I was actually worked the case where one of the Antifa people threw a Molotov cocktail lit into a van full of cops. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it all firsthand. So I can tell you right now that what I saw from January 6th had nothing to do with any of that. We didn't have grandmothers trying to storm my precinct. We didn't have, people going for strolls through the red ropes at the precinct trying to take over. This was not an insurrection. And quite honestly, there's a significant amount of evidence that's being overlooked by the January 6th Commission, whatever that is. It's
Like what?
Well, the fact that Ray Epps has never been truly investigated or spoken about. Then we've got video evidence of people actually directing people into the Capitol that had just come from the rally. We have additional video evidence of the doors of the Capitol being open. Those are 20,000 pounds a piece and they have to be open from the inside. President Trump actually offered multiple times National Guard members to protect the Capitol during his January 6th, rally. So there's ample amounts of evidence that he actually did what he could to prevent anything of that nature from happening. And there's additional evidence as well as, even a BLM member who's videotaped being inside the Capitol. He's been identified, he's been spoken about, but this is all left out of the narrative so that they can paint a narrative as these right-wing domestic terrorists, like we're all going to storm the Washington, D.C. with our, muskets and take over the world. This is just not true. I'd be the first one to tell you, I believe very strongly in justice and in honesty and fairness. Integrity is very important to me, but I've seen the real life results of these groups, of these extremist groups that want to go out and burn down buildings or burn, cars or burn vans full of cops to death. I've seen this firsthand. I've spoken to these people. I've interviewed them in the interview room. I've done criminal cases against them. I know the realities of it. And I'm telling you that this is, it's getting worse. They're becoming more and more empowered. And the longer we allow us to continue, the worse it's going to get, unfortunately.
I would like to switch gears here a bit, if I might. And obviously we had a Supreme Court ruling about abortion. And I know basically the ruling gave the rights back to the states to determine what could happen in their particular states. I'd like to hear from both of you how you feel about that Supreme Court ruling and what, if anything, you would do about women's reproductive rights as a member of Congress.
I don't know who's going first. I don't know if
Go
you want me to
ahead,
go.
grab it.
You say women's reproductive rights, we have a civil rights act that says everyone has the same rights. There's no male rights, there's no female rights, it's just rights. And there should be rights for a baby. The 14th Amendment says no state shall deny any person the right to life, liberty, and property. When is that fetus a person? I'm a Catholic, so we believe it's at conception, though I will not force my religious beliefs on anyone else. Let's use science, which is what everyone says is believe the science of science, and find out when is that heartbeat. I'm not God. I don't know when souls come into a body. So I can't tell you on the religious level when it's a person, but maybe we should all come down to what we believe when it came down to the jab and talk about the science. And when there's a heartbeat on that baby, it becomes a person. And when it becomes a person, it is now protected by the 14th Amendment. So even though Justice Bader Ginsburg said that was a horrible decision, and now everyone's talking about sending us back to the states, if we're going to protect our gun ownership by the Second Amendment and the Constitution, maybe we should start looking at the 14th Amendment and saying, wait, if a person has the right to life, liberty, and property, is that fetus now protected by the Constitution and it can't go to the states? But either way, state level or federal level, it's a person, and a person deserves more rights than the person who made that person. That's my belief.
Wait a minute, that was just a little bit confusing to me. A person deserves more rights than the person
But the
that.
child, the fetus, deserves to live more than the person who actually conceived that baby has a right to end its life.
Okay, and how about you, Mike?
I don't like abortion. I think it's barbaric. I also grew up Catholic. It's very near and dear to me, I guess, in some sense. I just find it to be abhorrent. I've seen obviously a lot of murders. I've seen a lot of violence in my life. I've seen a lot of those things perpetrated. And I think that ripping a baby from the womb is probably the most violent thing we could do. And it makes me a little crazy to think that this is something that we're even having to debate at this point in time in our culture and our history. I would like to say, though, that I was very impressed with the Supreme Court decision, simply because, I mean, 50 plus years ago, when Roe versus Wade was first decided, the mental gymnastics required for the Supreme Court at that time to actually come around and make the decision they did to kind of federalize this whole thing was beyond impressive. So when we get to, today, and we have these decisions come down, the court is really doing a great job, I think, of delineating between states' rights versus Fed rights, and in multiple decisions, West Virginia versus EPA, in the Second Amendment decision recently, and in this Roe versus Wade abortion decision thing, they've done a very good job at delineating between the federal overreach and the bureaucratic overreach and the state rights. As far as abortion is concerned, I would say that the heartbeat bill is probably most appropriate. I agree with Rob with that. At that point, at least, that is actually a life, and stopping all beating heart is ending a life. There's just no way around that.
One of the arguments I shouldn't say arguments, but one of the statements that has been brought out ever since this abortion ruling is that there are more rules surrounding abortion than there are surrounding guns, and who should have guns, and and checking the mental health of people who get gun licenses, etc. Do you agree with that statement?
Not even remotely. I mean, the amount of gun restriction we have, especially here in New York, is unbelievable. I mean, we have red flag laws on the books where basically your neighbor can be upset with you, or maybe they lean left and you lean right, and they don't like that, and make any kind of crazy allegation to any police department they like. And at that point, that police department has every right to go into your home and remove your firearms without any kind of jurisprudence. That's absolutely wrong. I mean, we have our rights for a reason. Our Second Amendment right is our most important right, simply because all the other rights are based on our ability to be able to defend ourselves from either a foreign power or a government that's gone tyrannical. So I would have to disagree wholeheartedly. I think, the idea that we somehow regulate abortion more than we do guns is just the two don't kind of go together. It's apples and oranges to me, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I don't see how, restricting abortion or limiting the ability of people to murder their unborn is any more or less important than our ability to defend ourselves.
Mike,
The two is the same.
Mike is a cop. I just want to follow up, right?
Yeah.
I know I've covered cops, and you do
Sure.
emotionally EMDs, or emotionally EMP, emotionally disturbed people, EDP. right?
EDPs, yeah.
Right. And there are people, some of these big shooters that have, and I understand the rights to gun ownership, but do you think that there should be, and like, again, as a cop, that before somebody buys a gun, there should be some kind of mental check? I mean, for public safety reasons.
Well, background checks I'm not opposed to. I'm not opposed to criminal background checks or even mental background checks as far as that's concerned. But all we have to do is go back just earlier this month, July 4th. And, the guy who shot the parade, he had been red flagged already. He had taken his firearms because he had been red flagged and flagged as somebody who was mentally not allowed to have those guns, that he was a danger to others and himself. And then his father went out and provided him additional firearms that he then went and used to shoot up that parade. So, criminals are criminals. They're going to find a way around the law. They always do. There's no two ways about that. They're not going to follow laws. You can pass every law you want. A criminal is a criminal because they don't follow those laws. So criminalizing good law-abiding citizens by trying to restrict these firearms based upon, assertions that just aren't true, like the term assault weapon, right? Any weapon can be an assault weapon. I can make a pencil an assault weapon technically if I stab somebody with it. It's just we use these catchy terms and these misnomers to make it seem like something it's really not. So I think that background checks and being able to verify somebody's mental state are important. But that being said, they shouldn't be precluded from owning a firearm if those things are in fact positive for them, that they're okay.
We haven't heard from you, Robert, on this subject.
I'd like to answer both of your questions, but with the second question first. A car can be used as a mass murder weapon, but we don't do background checks on mental health, and nor do we do background checks on whether they've committed crimes. And we give driver's licenses to illegal aliens who are in this country illegally, and they are criminals. So if you want to change the Constitution, there's an easy way to do it. Have a constitutional convention and make an amendment to put more restrictions on the Second Amendment, which I have no problem with you doing, but do it the way it was, change it the way it was designed. Right now, it says you cannot put any restrictions on a gun owner. Now, if you want to, then do it. Rally up your troops and get people out there to vote for changes to the Constitution. But until you do that, you can't just change the wording because you don't like it. And as far as I think your question was, there's more restrictions on abortion than there are on gun owners. There are absolutely no restrictions on abortion in the Constitution. We have to return to the Constitution and how it was designed and what it was designed to do. They're specifically talk in the Constitution, they specifically talk about your right to carry a weapon shall not be restricted. It says it in the Second Amendment. It's written, it's enumerated. There's nothing in the Constitution that talks about women's rights or women's reproductive rights. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be or there should be, but if you want a law passed, then pass it and then enforce it. But we have a government that we have laws on the books now that they don't enforce, like the border. If you want women's reproductive rights, pass a law, but they cannot infringe on life. We have to determine when life begins. And I think that that starts at a higher level than us, but we should agree on it and then fight for it. Now, I'm not saying if a 7-year-old girl gets raped by her uncle, that they should have the baby. I have problems with that in my heart. I have an 11-year-old daughter. So, I'm not saying these are easy decisions, but we have a constitution, we have laws, and we have to follow it. Doesn't say anything about abortion in the Constitution, says nothing about women's reproductive rights, says nothing about men's rights. But it does say something about ownership in a gun, and it was designed that way so government cannot take advantage of the people.
But the Supreme Court did rule you can't, even though there's freedom of speech, you can't yell fire in a movie theater. It's like a famous decision because it's a public safety type of issue, which is why, even though, yes, everybody has a right to a gun, there is a public safety component to it. I'm sorry for interjecting. It's not a question.
Well, they also ruled that abortion was legal, and that changed, and that just goes with the tides of the court. Obviously, I mean, can you win that in the Supreme Court? If you yell fire in a movie theater, can they really hold you? I mean, that's debatable, and it's going to be decided on who controls the court. But again, we have these laws in place because our founders knew from experience and from history that if we don't put these things in place, this government, this constitutional republic will change, and it will become a socialist country, and it could become a communist country. And these safeguards are in place for a reason, not to deny anyone rights, but to protect them.
So you both have talked a lot about PTSD and about the things that you've seen in war and what it can do to the mental health of the men and women who serve. We also know that a lot of these young, and they're mostly young, shooters that have been out there in the mass murders that have existed are people who have some sort of, you can call it PTSD, you can call it whatever you want to call it for whatever reason they have it, but they have mental health issues. Then what do we do about those people? How do we get them into a place that they will not go out and shoot up a school or shoot up a mall or shoot up a parade?
Well, I'm going to talk about this PTSD, and I don't know if I cut off Mike, but Mike may have PTSD. He saw combat. These people using this word PTSD as if it's, just a prescription you get at a drugstore.
I'm not saying that.
Well, I'm saying there are mental health issues and there are PTSD issues, and they're separated. You want to stop mass shootings, you want to put criminals away, get rid of bail reform, get more mental health care out there for people who need it. They advertise on TV, drugs. Every commercial is about a drug. They advertise on TV about transgender and all these different things. How about advertise on TV day in and day out about mental health? How about that there's counseling out there? Here's a number to call. How about advertise on TV about social services for children that if they get raped or touched, call this number? Why don't we embed in their minds that there's help out there, that you can go to someone, so if a child does get raped, they know it's embedded, they're programmed, I can call and get some help rather than go 3 months and have to terminate a pregnancy. And the same thing with mental health. Let them know there's mental health help out there, and there's nothing wrong with having mental health issues, but go see someone. Use our programming the right way rather than indoctrinating kids to keep us separated.
Well, why couldn't you propose something like that in Congress and have it be paid for federally to be able to provide those programs?
We can do that. And I would love to do something like that where we do paid advertising, but you look at NPR, you look at some of these, you know, public access television, they're controlled and given money to say a certain narrative. I mean, you have to, the mainstream media, and I'm not saying you two, you're wonderful people. I like the way you're coming at us with these questions, but there's no doubt that the mainstream media is controlled by the radical left. There's no doubt that there's a narrative they put out every single day, and you can't trust them. So we have to find a means to maybe take away Section 230. I don't know what it is yet, but we will find, whether it's Mike or me, it's not going to be Garbarino. We will find a way to make sure people get the services that they're supposed to get, and we can cut off these narratives that just keep us fighting and looking at each other. You know, if I went to Europe, a black guy goes to Europe or a transvestite goes to Europe, they're going to call you an American. Everyone else can see us as one group, Americans. We just see each other as these different categories and groups, and that's this programming we're getting from the media. Let's just get back to helping people.
I want to read this message that has just come in our chat, and I want you to respond to it, both of you. As a conservative Christian American who happens to be Black, there is a chilling effect on free speech due to cancel culture. I live in a town where there is a quiet, silent majority of minorities who have and will vote Republican, but who have no voice. Please ask for our vote too. Please acknowledge us. It's really lonely being a Black deplorable. The candidate that acknowledges our existence will have an edge and have my vote. Discuss this, please.
Let's start with Mike since it's his turn, huh?
Yep.
Thank you. We've been in those communities. We've gone into every single community out here. We didn't, hide from any community. We didn't hide from any single segment of the population. I know that traditionally and historically, the Republican Party has tended to, focus on certain segments of the population, certain demographics, and they did leave behind a lot of the minority communities. They did leave behind a lot of people who deserve our respect, who deserve our attention, because quite simply, these minority communities, and I've seen this firsthand all my life, have been crushed by leftist policy. I mean, they broke up their family structures, they broke up their communities, they broke up their ability to actually function as a community together, as to be, completely cohesive, honestly. So I think that it's important that we reach out to those communities. I think it's important that we get everybody under the tent, so to speak, as I've heard said before. It's a very important thing to do. I think that those communities should not be forgotten, and we have been in those communities. And here in Long Island, it's for us to be Wyandanch and Brentwood and those kinds of areas in our district that are more minority than not. So, and we've been there. We've spoken to numerous people there, Amityville, other areas as well.
But how would you help give them a voice?
By echoing their voice, by carrying their message forward, the same we would for every constituent. When I look at congressional representatives, when I look at any representative in elected office, what I expect to see is strength. What I expect to see is honesty and integrity. What I expect to see is them be a megaphone of sorts for their communities, for the people that they represent. So if the people they represent are screaming for, change in economics, change in whatever it is, and bail reform, and these kinds of programs that are destroying these communities, then that's what we should be echoing and screaming for. Unfortunately, our representative right now doesn't do that. He actually goes to the opposite direction. But I think that, in this race now, they have good choices as far as representatives that actually will give them that voice and will bring their voice to Washington.
Robert?
516-369-8667. That's the way you get your voice out. Come join me. Go to my endorsement page, go to my testimony page. You'll see people of every single color that I've worked with and I've fought for. There's a guy named Staff Sergeant Terrain who'll tell you, when I had to give away a special position in the counter-narcoterrorism task force, I chose him. I chose him because he was the best qualified. You call me and I guarantee you'll have someone fighting for you, and not only fighting for you, I'm a leader. I'm going to teach you and every person. I don't care. Listen, I'm an infantry officer. Whoever's on my left and right, we only care that they shoot that way. We don't look at the color or the gender or the sexual identity. As long as they're not shooting this way and they're shooting that way, we love you. And that's how, and Mike is a service member too, we don't look at color. You're a brother and sister deplorable, so you have room on my campaign and you're always going to have a voice. Look at the testimonies on my page and you'll see, I don't look at you as a Black deplorable. I look at you as a deplorable, and you're fighting alongside me, and you're never going to be seen as that. But if you feel people are treating you that way, or you're getting harassed or bullied, then the bully's going to get a swift kick in the pants by me. I don't go for that stuff. I don't go for treating people who Now, if a guy wears a dress and wants to be called Shirley, I'm gonna call him Shirley, and he's not gonna get harassed or bullied. You're gonna be treated humanely, and that goes for races and sexual identities and religion. I don't care about that stuff, but come join us and you'll have a voice.
I have a question just kind of quickly, and that is President Trump did get rid of the SALT tax deduction. You both represent Long Island where property taxes and state taxes are killing homeowners. A lot of them are fixed incomes. This is one where it, would you support this killing of the SALT deduction as President Trump did, or would you try to repeal it? It affects a lot of your constituents, I'm sure.
Who's
I
going?
would absolutely appeal it. I think the getting rid of it was honestly a very serious mistake. I understand the thought process behind why they tried to get rid of it, but quite honestly, they made it, and it's very difficult to live in New York, right? Let's just be honest here in New York State. We have some of the highest taxes in the country as it is, whether it's property tax, school tax, whatever other crazy tax they can come up with. So reducing that or getting rid of that, I think did New York a great disservice as far as really ratcheting up the pressure, especially on people on fixed income. You have senior citizens paying exorbitant school taxes for schools they have no children in and haven't had children in for decades. I think it's a very unfair system. It's very much lopsided. I think it needs to be changed and corrected. Quite honestly, I think that there's a lot that can be done for that, especially when it comes to the SALT tax or even as far as school choice is concerned. Let the money follow the child for the schools, not have it, taken from people who don't have kids in the system or not invested in that system in any way.
Robert?
Yeah, this has always been a sticky subject for me. I do not like the fact that there's no longer a SALT tax deduction. However, if we're going to have one, I think we need to start regulating how much federal funds go to those states and maybe stop penalizing the elected officials who continue to raise the taxes, and maybe help out the person who's taking that tax burden. Maybe make it a little tougher on those, Democratic governors, because these are, let's be honest, their own blue states. Let's maybe say you're gonna have to start, cutting back on the size of your government and your spending, and we can help you out. We can help out your taxpayer, but just to keep throwing money, you can't keep throwing money at a problem. We got to start holding these radical left Democrat governors accountable for continually raising taxes and giving out services. Like in California, you want to give free health care to, illegal aliens. Listen, let's take care of Americans first, and then we can worry about all these other people.
I don't recall anybody being suggested they'd give universal health care to illegal aliens.
Gavin Newsom did, yes.
And he did? Okay. All right. So I think it's time, Stephen, for you to bring up your favorite part.
My favorite part is you each get to ask each other a question and you get a 2-minute response. So this is where you guys can be the journalist against your opponent.
Who goes first?
And don't be to the left, because now that you're the journalist, we think, I'm just kidding. You go first. Robert, you can ask Mike a question.
Hey, Mike, do you know a guy named Joe Carnetta?
I do know Joe. Yeah, Joe's a retired detective from the NYPD. He's a private investigator on Long Island now.
Had a couple of guys who I served with say that a private investigator was following me, trying to find out things about my military career. I was just curious if you knew who that was and if he was under your employment.
No, I have no private investigators under my employment. We ran a completely grassroots campaign. All the money spent was spent on advertising, printing, things like that. We haven't employed or would employ a private investigator. It's just not the kind of thing I would do. It's not something that I would ever get involved with. So if there's something there, that would be something separate, but not with us, not with the campaign.
If there's
That's not
something
my
there,
style.
that's something separate. What was that?
Say again, I'm sorry.
I'm saying you said if there's something there, there's something separate.
Well, yeah, it would have to be something external because it's just not the way I do things. I don't see the point of, I don't like the dirtiness of politics we see a lot of time. I don't like trashing people. I don't like ripping someone's life apart and trying to trash them based upon something like that. I just don't see it as being very productive or positive at all in any way, shape, or form. I feel like it distracts from actually what should be important, which is policy, personality, your ability to kind of work under pressure or get things done. Those are important aspects to me. So I wouldn't spend time on something like that. It just isn't it's just not my personal way of doing things. I understand in politics it happens, but it's just not my thing. Not personally, not my thing, not my campaign. You know, it wouldn't, we haven't done it. We haven't engaged in it. We stayed on track with the messaging the entire time as far as solutions are concerned, on actual policy, what we actually believe will be the best way forward as far as getting things fixed and back on track for Americans. So going off and trying to have this private investigation or something like that to try and trash somebody, I just don't see the point of it. I don't see where it would get you.
Do
You
you
know,
know for this detective?
I just wanted to let you know that members of your campaign have used these things against me, and I was just curious if you were involved. So thank you.
Do you have a question for Robert, Mike?
yeah. I guess my biggest question would probably be, how many of the endorsements have you had that you paid for? I find it, I don't like the paid endorsement thing. I understand people have to make money, but the paid endorsement thing bothers me. It does. It just as a person, it bothers me. Not to, and please don't get me wrong, it's not to disparage you or anybody else in any way. I'm just curious, to be honest with you. It's a question I would like to have to ask you, but I'll ask it here. It's fine.
Okay, so you accused a three-star general and the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and former national security advisor to Donald Trump for taking a payment for his endorsement of me. And I'll add to that, when I worked for him for 4 years, it's a video endorsement. Not a single dime went to him. He's a friend and appreciates everything I did for him. So when people disparage three-star generals and heroes, it's kind of a sad move. Rudy Giuliani, who endorsed me, I did not pay him. He loves everything about my campaign and what I stand for. Bernie and Sid, I did not pay. They love my message. They love everything I stand for. The 19 or 20 patriot groups that support me, I have not paid a single one for an endorsement. However, after meeting one young lady who was the president of a Bethpage Moms and Dads Club, who's not even in the district, found out she had unbelievable qualifications. I hired her. After losing my campaign manager in middle of February, I needed somebody to handle my social media. And I hired two of the greatest social media experts out there, Sean Faresh and Kevin Smith. Never hired their Patriot group. I hired them to get me over the hump for 3 months and then told them I didn't need their services anymore. I used X strategy. So when you use words and narratives from Jesse Garcia and Andrew Garbarino about paid endorsements, it's really a sad attempt to say that you have none and that mine are, maliciously gotten. I have 19 or 20 Patriot groups that endorse me. You have none. I have General Flynn. I have Mayor Giuliani. I have Bernie and Sid, and you don't have people at that level. If we just stuck to the issues, it might be a really cool campaign to run. But when you say those things about paid endorsements, I got that endorsement in December. I didn't hire them till the beginning of March.
Okay, that's time, and we'll give Mike a.
Yes, he's raised his hand. He clearly wants to say
I
something.
should have raised my hand.
I didn't see your hand, I'm sorry. The boxes switched.
Yes.
I've never disparaged General Flynn, nor would I ever disparage General Flynn or his service. I think he's a patriot and a brave man and honestly a great man. As far as not being endorsed by patriot groups, I've been endorsed by patriot groups. It's not at all factually correct or true. I've received numerous endorsements from numerous different organizations throughout. I haven't had any issues with getting things of that nature. The information I'm going by is based on FEC filings and other things.
You have an FC filing for loud majority?
Sean Faresh and Kevin Smith. And
Loud majority, Patriot group.
let me finish. You can paint it as anything you like, but the obvious optics of that are awful, right? This is an awful thing because they didn't just handle your social media. They brought you on their podcast. They advocated on your podcast for you. They said things that were actually factually incorrect on their podcast about me and my campaign. And as far as trying to disparage me for the service I've done or the work I've done, that's somehow being paid to be a detective or anything in that nature, that's absolutely ridiculous and just an attempt by you to try and destroy anything that you think makes me a better candidate. Listen, I understand these problems at a very, very visceral level. I've led men through combat. I led a team of corpsmen through the most arduous battle space this country ever saw, with a higher survival rate for trauma by over 10% than they saw in civilian trauma at the same time. And we did that with none of the equipment, none of the staff, none of the personnel. So
I'm not too sure how that has, whether that has to do with running.
It's about leadership. It's about
You
leadership.
accuse me of
It's about
paying for an
leadership.
endorsement, which clearly I did not do. I hired 2 guys 3 months after I got the endorsement. I needed someone to do my social media. You're losing and you're losing.
That's
everything. I
not
get
even
it.
remotely true, Rob.
All
It's
right,
just not even remotely
I
true.
get it, and I
So,
understand your
um,
frustration.
Not true.
Just play it honest.
I am playing it honest. I've been honest
Your
throughout. Rob.
wife-
I've been integrity
Your
driven
wife,
throughout. I
the only
didn't change
reason, the only
districts.
reason
I
the
didn't change
majority
my
went
reason
after
for
you is your
district.
wife
Gentlemen.
boxed them.
Yeah,
I've been honest throughout. My integrity is
Mike,
unimpeachable.
the only
Gentlemen.
reason.
I see how hard it is being a journalist.
Gentlemen, that's enough.
I just want to answer his attack. The only reason the
Not
loud
an
majority
attack,
went
it's the
against
truth.
you is your wife doxed them. The only
She
reason I
never
went against
doxed them.
you.
That was a public document
your
that was
wife
shared by
filed a
somebody else.
lawsuit
that
against
Okay,
shouldn't be
we're
shared.
not going to get
Nobody
down.
doxed anybody,
this.
Rob. Nobody followed anybody. Nobody hired a private investigator. You sued everybody in the campaign before anything else.
That's
Okay,
absolutely
you've
not
done
true.
things dishonest.
Your
and-
wife sued me in the
and a
campaign.
All
No,
right.
she did
enough.
not sue anybody.
Final,
Nobody
final.
sued
we're not-
you and Garbarino sued everybody.
I'm
You
going to
sued
shut your
nobody.
mics off if we don't stop this. We
Yeah,
don't
let's
need
please,
this.
we get a final comment. It's 9:51. I do want to say again that, for both the Democrats and Republicans love to blame media. You see how tough it can be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Person,
Exactly.
not an easy job. Just
So,
throw
just
that out.
one quick question into you, Robert.
Yes.
Which St. James where you live, is that in District 1 or District 2?
District 1.
Okay, but you're running in District 2.
Right,
I-
it changed. When the district lines first got drawn, I was in 1.
No,
Then
you were
I
not.
was
Not
in
in any
3.
map, not in any way.
Then I
Never.
was in District 2, and now I was back in District 1. So the lines changed. You could look at the maps and see
I
where
can
my
look at the
house
maps and
was.
tell you right now, it's not true.
And the funny thing is, Mike approached me at the America First warehouse when I was in 2 and said to me, listen, if you're in 2, I
Rob,
would,
stop lying. Look, much like your
Mike, I
website
got your
claiming you were
text
combat
messages.
injured originally, which we can
Mike,
show
I
a
got your text
screenshot right
messages.
here. It's
You-
just
you
not
have a
true, Rob. You
problem
lied from
telling
day
All
me
right,
one.
let me
You
just
lied
say,
about your financial backers. You lied about everything.
first of all, is it not true that there is a law or a rule that says you can run in any congressional district you
You
don't?
can.
live
You
in it?
absolutely can. For Congress only. Yeah, you
For
can.
what? I'm sorry, what was that
For
last?
Congress only. So for state
Yeah.
senate or other things, you have to live in your district. For Congress, you can
All
live
you have to
anywhere.
do is look at
You
how
can
the
run
maps keep
upstate.
going the 4 times. You can go on the redistricting website and it'll show you how they changed 3 or 4 times. It
And you
started
lived in
back
one for every-
June.
Look, I'm going to
No.
tell you right now that this redistricting thing has been a nightmare
Yeah.
for us to try and follow. So I'm just not going to go there. I'm just asking because there've been some questions here asking us about that. So this has been a lively, interesting time. I wonder how much more fun it would have been if Mr. Garbarino had been here. But
You'll
let-
never see that. He's afraid to debate me one-on-one.
1-on-2,
Well, it'll be one-on-one.
right?
That's
At
the
any-
race.
At any rate, let's take time now for final statements from both of you. And we'll give each of you
2 minutes.
2 minutes. We have 2 minutes. So let's start with you, Mike.
The choice is simple, with this whole thing, we can sit here and throw aspersions on each other, but at the end of the day, quite simply, I've proven myself time and again. I've got 2 commendations for the NYPD for integrity for people who tried to bribe me that I then put on tape and collared for it. I'm not the liar. I never have been. Integrity is the most important thing to me because it's all I've ever done. I've pursued criminals and liars across the world and across the country. I've done this consistently for over 25 years. Robert Cornicelli has been involved in politics and all this guerrilla tactics nonsense for over 25 years here in the Long Island politics scene. Now, he keeps trying to accuse us of being an establishment plant. Okay, he got in a race 4 months after we were already in a race. So we're a plant now to undo his campaign? No, not true. He put on his website originally that he was combat injured, that it was 100% a combat related injury. That's not true. Ladies and gentlemen, he stubbed his toe in Mississippi, and this was his real injury. And then spent 3 years complaining about this. And this is all on Facebook. This is all information put out there by people who served with him. And I'm tired of being attacked constantly for everything I've done. I sued nobody in this race. I've done everything above the board and honestly. I've been nothing but consistent with integrity and solutions about how to fix these problems since day one. And I've got nothing but lies, dishonesty, and games played with me since day one. Nobody asked Robert Cornicelli to District 2. He helped himself in. He ran a poll before he jumped in. He did so at the behest of his financial backers. So I guess my real question for him should have been, what's he going to do when he's in Congress and they ask him to take a bill that's going to hurt the American people? So we already know the answer to that, don't we? Because he jumped right when they told him to jump. I'm just, I'm fed up. I'm fed up with the lies. I'm fed up with the games. This is exactly the swamp creatures we're talking about. This is exactly the kind of thing that we've been fighting against this whole time, supposedly. We're having this constant battle with people who want to misrepresent themselves, their actions, their beliefs, their intentions, and everything else. And I'm sick of it. I am exactly what I say I am. I am exactly what I say I am. I have always been that. I've never been anything but that. Thank you for your time, and thank you both for your time very much.
You're welcome, Mike. Robert?
You know, when my 7-year-old has a temper tantrum, I tend to ignore him and talk about other things that matter. I'm in this race because as a congressman, I could bring more resources to the fights that I've been fighting in this district, on this island for almost 30 years. At every healthcare rally, at every rally against critical race theory, at every unmasking our children rally, at every defend police rally, I never saw Garbarino, I never saw Rakebrandt. Their only claim to fame is what I got paid to do. They can never talk about what they've done for people without personal gain. I don't have a second job. Some of these other candidates, on their off time, they sell homes. I'm in here, again, I'm donating my entire retirement. I'm donating the balance between the two salaries to charity because that's what I've always done. You could just see the temperament in this debate. When a person's in it from the heart, they don't let these outside distractions take them off message and off their path. You can look at everything I've ever said and done. Just go to Facebook, just go to, Twitter, see what I've done. I'm not going to attack Mike's military career. That's shameful. I've seen it happen before. Usually when children can't beat another child at whatever it is they're fighting against or competing against, they try to take down a competitor rather than bring themselves up. I will always try to raise myself to the highest standard. I'm never going to try to bring down someone else. This is just how you win in this country. Fight and win. Don't try to bring down your opponent. Don't try to bring down your adversary. Be better than them. So all this stuff about my hurt feelings, hey, we're going to run into this when we speak to more of the people on the radical left. AOC always has hurt feelings and Maxine Waters has hurt feelings. My feelings aren't hurt. Everything, I have a whole list on the side of my screen of every single officer evaluation form in the military. I could pop up the one from the person that Mike's quoting. His name is Joe Brady. If you'd like, I could pop it up on the screen and show you the stellar evaluation the guy gave me. So let's just move forward and beat the radical left.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks to both of you, Mike Rakebrandt and Robert Cornicelli, for joining us this evening. It's been rather a lively discussion.
Has to be.
And we will. And Stephen, as usual, good job with both the questions and the timing. Great to work with you. And please, anybody who's watching this evening, make sure you get out and vote on August 23rd, or vote ahead of time for the ballots as you can cast them, because it's important. It's weird to have a primary in August. Lots of people aren't even around, but we need to make sure you vote. So please do.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Good luck on the campaign trail to both of you. We'll be seeing you around, and we'll see all of you in our next debate. Good night.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
great night.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night.